Judaism during the time of Jesus, Part 2.
Woke up to a whisper from the void, searching through shadows of chasing truths. The road is long but rewarded by houses and good fruits. The Logos leads me home, and this is the divine truth.
The Therapeutae, an ancient Jewish mystic sect of Judaism beginning in the 1st century BC era that was active in Alexandria, Egypt, as this was their home. They were also active in the years of Jesus in the 1st century AD era. They went extinct by the 3rd or 4th century AD era, being absorbed into Christianity. Now, this particular group we mostly know of them due to Philo of Alexandria, a 1st century Jewish historian that lived before and after the years of Jesus and was active during the years of Jesus. Now, some scholars argue that this group never existed. Some scholars argue that this group was Essene and were misidentified as a different group. Some scholars even argue that this group was pre-Christian in origin and would eventually become the first Christians. Some scholars even argue that this group laid down the foundations of what became Christian Montanism. Now, some scholars even argue that this group were Jubus, meaning Jewish people with Buddhist influences or Buddhist adaptations into their said religion, which is also quite interesting as there were Buddhist missionaries that were travelling to Egypt during this time. Now, the name Therapeutae means to heal the soul. It also means one who is attended to the gods. Philo of Alexandria, who records this group, mentions them in high honour, respect and reverence, and even viewing them as more holy and pure than the Jewish priest in the temple and his own Jewish people back home, which is very interesting. Now, in regards to this group, they are similar to the Essenes in regards to their spiritual lifestyle and practices, as they also practice regular baptism. They would also practice fasting, meditation and deep prayer. This group was also different to the Essenes, as they were very much equality in men and women, where most Essenes in respect were celibate men. Now, many Essenes were also apocalyptic. It doesn't seem that this group was apocalyptic, rather almost dualistic in the sense that they believed that this material world was inferior to the spiritual realm and that this body was a type of prison in order to distract the soul, and the higher truths were engaging in the deeper philosophies to obtain spiritual enlightenment and to build a personal relationship with God through spiritual enlightenment and through the spirit within. So they believed that the soul was immortal and that it would return to God. Now, in regards to this would only be ones who would live a pure lifestyle. Otherwise, the soul would simply turn to dust and be destroyed. So, ones who were worthy to have a relationship with God would in turn return to God. So the soul wasn't necessarily eternal in the regards to the Therapeutae beliefs. Now, the Therapeutae were also a shared community like the Essenes. They in turn were also different to the Essenes as they engaged in mixed dancing between men and women, and this was frowned upon and disliked by many Essene groups that were also celibate men. Now, not all Essenes were male dominated, some were also very much equality, similar to the Therapeutae. Now, the Therapeutae lived similar to monks in seclusion in the holy building, and the word monastery actually comes from this group. And because of this, early Christians actually confused this group for early Christian monks, believing that they were Christian. But they in turn predate Christianity. Now, within their monastery or holy building, they kept possibly the Hebrew Torah or their own version of the Torah, or they kept the Greek Septuagint, which were copied from the original Hebrew text that are now lost to time into Greek. Now, we don't actually know, but they also kept within this monastery hymns, novel texts such as exorcism spells or prayers, and divine healing spells and prayers. But in regards to the Torah or the Septuagint or their own version of the Torah, we don't actually know. Let's discuss the Nazarites, not so much a Jewish sect, but rather a Jewish vow that could be taken voluntarily by any Jewish sect, by any one of the Jewish community, regardless of their sex. So this could be taken by male and females, regardless of what community they belong to. It was a dedicated vow in honouring to God, either to Yahweh or El, as there were Jewish sects that worship a different God. Now, this vow, done for a selective period of time, they would not shave their heads, and they would offer their hair to the altar when the vow was finished to perform a sacrifice as a way of completing the vow along with the sacrificial animal. They would not partake in any vine products such as grapes or even raisins. They would not drink alcohol or even juice from the grapes or from raisins, for example. Now, they would also avoid contact with all dead bodies, even if a family member had passed away, as not to unpurify themselves or to not make themselves unclean. The Boethusians, another Second Temple period faction of Judaism that was active during the years of Jesus and rival to both the Pharisees and Sadducees. They were a part of the priestly class that also ran the temple. Now, the Boethusians derived their name from a priestly family, Boethius, which in turn were descendants that were high-ranking that ran the temple complexes. Now, the Boethusians were mostly interested in performing the temple sacrifices and temple rituals correctly, so their main focuses were on the running of the temple. Now, the Boethusians only accepted the first 5 books of Moses like the Sadducees. They also took the first 5 books of Moses literally, which in turn they also rejected the oral traditions that got recorded as the Mishnah and the Talmud, and this would bring them into conflict with the Pharisees that did accept the oral traditions and that had a more extensive law than just the first 5 books of Moses. Now, some historians also consider the Boethusians as a subgroup of the Sadducees in respect to the larger movement of the Sadducees. Now, another Jewish sect during the time of Jesus was the John the Baptist movement, which we don't know much about. It's possible that Jesus was a part of this movement or was a co-leader of this movement, and during his baptism by John the Baptist, this is possible for the blessing or permission of John to Jesus to start his own movement. Now, in regards to John the Baptist, he taught repentance to change within. He would also baptize his followers and those listening to his sermons regularly, similar to the Essenes. So possible that he was an Essene, or he took on Essene values or Jewish mystic values and a Jewish mystic or Essene approach. Now, baptism also symbolizes rebirth, repentance, purification, to change within, to be reborn in spirit. Now, this also lines towards John being an Essene or a mystic. Now, John the Baptist preaching the kingdom of heaven is coming. This can also be interpreted to the kingdom of heaven is within. To find it, you'll find it soon. This can be also interpreted as the end of the world and God's kingdom coming now, as some Essenes were apocalyptic. So it's possible that John had his own complete movement as an offshoot of an Essene movement or an Essene branch or an Essene mystic branch, depending on one's own interpretation or belief. We have the Mandaeans, who were a Gnostic dualist group that claimed to be the descendants of the original John the Baptist movement, and it's more than likely that they were the descendants of the original John movement that was at odds with the Jesus movement. Mandaeans claim that John the Baptist is the last true prophet and that Jesus was a usurper of the teachings of John the Baptist, and this is why I stated that it's more than likely they were descendants of the John the Baptist movement that were at odds with the Jesus movement and that didn't convert to Christianity. Now, the Mandaeans, like the Edomites, which were Jewish Christians, claimed that John the Baptist was vegetarian, that he ate locust bean and not the locust bug, which got mistranslated. Now, this would also match the Essene approach, which many Essenes were vegetarian, some were pescatarian. Again, we had different groups and subgroups, and it's likely that when John died, these groups would split, forming their own subgroups and unique movements. Now, like the Essenes, the John the Baptist movement was a shared community, living out in the wilderness, preaching repentance and baptism, which also suggests that John the Baptist was an Essene, or very likely a subgroup of the Essenes leading his own Essene movement, or mystic movement. So, this is interesting. So again, we have many forms of Judaism during the time of Jesus. Let's continue with some more. We also had the Galilean Jews, or Jews living in the region of Galilee, which under Roman occupation was home to various different cultures and faiths, from Canaanites, Jewish mystics, Hellenistic Jews, Greeks, Gentiles, and Jesus himself. Now, this region, because of its mixed influence, the Jewish people there were more open to Greek philosophy, Hellenistic approach, and a mystic approach and mystic beliefs. Now, it's because of this vast cultural identity and influence within the region of Galilee that many of the Jewish people would look down at the Galilean people, and including Jesus. Now, there were also the Edomites, which were Canaanite people that were forced to convert into Judaism, and because of this, many of the Edomites worshipped alongside the God of Israel other Canaanite pantheon gods. Now, to be fair, the Judean people, or the Israelites, were in fact a Canaanite tribe coming from the Canaanites. Yahweh and El were Canaanite gods. So in a result, some Jews worship Yahweh, others worship El Elyon, Most High God. Others believing that El Elyon was a supreme God and Yahweh was a lesser god and a child or son of El Elyon, the Most High. Again, we had various different sects of Judaism meaning different beliefs. Now, during the time of Jesus, we also had the Hellenists, which were Greeks that hadn't yet fully converted into Judaism, or were ones who worshipped Greek gods alongside the God of Israel and would attend the temple for worship of the God of Israel and would also worship alongside this god other gods and would offer sacrifices to the God of Israel alongside their gods, some of which were Greek-speaking Jews, Jewish people that couldn't speak the Hebrew dialect or Aramaic and could only speak Greek. So we had, again, various different sects of Judaism. We also had the Gentiles that hadn't yet fully converted into Judaism that would be, again, associated with these Hellenists or even Canaanites.